but it was the first sincere sound I had heard from her. The veteran nodded once. "I accept that," he said quietly, "but you need to do better." That moment could have ended the story, but consequences still had to be addressed. I leaned back and folded my hands. "Here is what's going to happen," I said firmly. She straightened slightly, bracing herself. "You are charged with assault and disorderly conduct. Given the victim's age, the public distribution, and prior complaints, I am imposing structured consequences." Her face tightened again. "You will complete mandatory anger management counseling," I said. "You will complete 200 hours of community service." She swallowed. "Specifically," I continued, "you will complete those hours at the local Veterans Center." Her eyes widened. "That's not fair," she said quickly. I held her gaze. "Fair," I replied calmly, "is a man asking for quiet and receiving respect. What you are receiving is accountability." The room remained completely still, but I wasn't finished. "You will also pay a fine," I added, "and you will remain under probation for 1 year. Her shoulders sagged slightly. I could see the reality settling in. And then I said something I rarely say. "If you violate these terms, custody will not be optional." Her eyes widened again. I let the silence linger. Then I leaned forward one last time. "Money can buy a lot of things," I said quietly, "but it cannot buy character, and it cannot buy your way above the law." Her eyes filled again. For the first time, she nodded without argument. But as I prepared to move forward formally, I noticed something else. Mr. Harper hadn't sat down. He was still standing, and something about that told me this day wasn't finished teaching lessons just yet. I noticed Mr. Harper was still standing, and after 4 decades on this bench, I've learned to trust my instincts. When a prosecutor doesn't sit down, it usually means the story isn't over. I looked at him carefully. "Yes, Mr. Harper?" I asked. He adjusted the file in his hand. "Your Honor," he said, "there's one more matter the court should be aware of before final disposition." I felt the room tighten again. The young woman's head snapped toward him. "What now?" she muttered under her breath. I didn't respond to that. I kept my eyes on him. "Go ahead," I said. He opened the folder and slid a document toward Christina, who passed it to me. I scanned the top line. My eyebrows lowered slightly. "This morning," he continued, "the video in question triggered an automated review by the platform. During that review, additional archived footage connected to this defendant was flagged." I looked up slowly. "Additional footage?" I repeated. He nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, content involving other individuals, similar behavior, provocation, physical contact." I felt a slow, controlled breath move through me. "So you're telling me," I said carefully, "that this is not an isolated lapse in judgment?" "No, Your Honor," he replied. "It appears to be part of a pattern of escalating conduct." The word escalating sat heavy in the air. I turned toward her. Her confidence had evaporated. She wasn't smirking anymore. She wasn't rolling her eyes. She looked scared. "What is he talking about?" I asked her directly. She shook her head quickly. "It's not like that. Those videos are jokes, pranks. Everyone does pranks." I leaned forward slightly. "Pranks," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "It's a thing. You push boundaries. You get reactions. That's how you grow." I stared at her for a moment. "You grow?" I asked quietly. She hesitated. "I mean followers," she corrected. I let that settle. "Followers," I said slowly. "And what exactly are they following?" She didn't answer. Mr. Harper continued. "Your Honor, one of the archived clips shows the defendant intentionally provoking an elderly store employee. Another shows her throwing a drink at a man outside a restaurant." The courtroom stirred. I felt something cold move through me. This wasn't immaturity. This was repetition. I looked at her. "Is this accurate?" I asked. Her voice came out smaller this time. "They were staged," she said weakly. "People exaggerate. It's content." I placed my glasses down again. Do those people look like actors to you? I asked. She didn't respond. I turned back to Mr. Harper. Has any of this resulted in charges before? I asked. No formal convictions, he said. Complaints were withdrawn. I've been in public service long enough to understand what that sometimes means. People get tired. People don't want the hassle. People move on. But patterns don't move on. They build. Let me pause here and ask you something. If someone humiliates strangers repeatedly and no one stops them, what message are we sending? That it's acceptable? That attention excuses harm? Think about that. Because accountability delayed often becomes accountability amplified. I leaned back and studied her face carefully. She was no longer defiant. She was calculating. And then she said something that told me exactly where this was heading. My dad will handle it, she said quietly. The words were almost automatic, reflexive. I didn't react immediately. I let the silence stretch. Your father? I asked calmly. She nodded. He knows people, she said. He'll fix this. I felt something steady and unmovable settle inside me. I don't work for your father, I said evenly. Her eyes flickered. And this courtroom, I continued, is not a subscription service. The gallery went silent again. I have spent 40 years making sure that a millionaire and a minimum wage worker stand on equal ground in here, I said, and I'm not about to change that now. Her breathing quickened. I didn't mean it like that, she said. You did, I replied. You just didn't think I'd challenge it. I looked at the veteran briefly. He stood there with quiet dignity. He hadn't said another word, and I realized something important. This wasn't just about her learning a lesson. It was about making sure she didn't continue harming others under the shield of privilege. I turned back to Mr. Harper. What is the legal implication of this archive material? I asked. He answered carefully. It strengthens the case for enhanced sentencing and possible additional charges if victims choose to pursue. I nodded slowly. I looked at her again. Ma'am, I said softly now, you told me earlier that this wasn't serious, that people get slapped every day, that content disappears. I leaned forward. But patterns don't disappear, I said. They escalate. Her lip trembled slightly. I could see the reality finally pressing in. I took a slow breath. In my courtroom, I said firmly, status does not dilute consequences. Her voice cracked. I didn't think it would go this far, she whispered. I heard that sentence clearly, and I answered it just as clearly. Actions go exactly as far as we push them, I said. The veteran shifted slightly beside her. I looked at him. Sir, I asked gently, did you know about these other incidents? He shook his head. No, Your Honor, he said quietly, but I'm not surprised. That honesty struck me. Not surprised. That meant something about her demeanor had already spoken volumes. I folded my hands together again. Here's what's going to happen, I said. She straightened nervously. I am adding structured probation conditions that include monitored digital conduct, I said. You will attend a restorative justice session with the veteran community, and you will surrender access to monetized content accounts during probation. Her eyes widened. You can't do that, she said quickly. I can, I replied calmly, because your content became criminal conduct. Her shoulders slumped. The courtroom felt still again, but before I finalized the ruling, I looked at her one last time. Let me ask you something, I said softly. When you posted that video, what did you feel? She hesitated. Powerful, she admitted. There it was, not funny, not playful, powerful. I nodded slowly. And how do you feel right now? I asked. Her eyes filled. Small, she whispered. I let that word hang in the air. Power without responsibility always ends in smallness, I said quietly. And for the first time since this case began, she didn't argue. But as I prepared to formally conclude the sentencing, I heard something behind me, A quiet but unmistakable sound, the courthouse door opening. I turned my head. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, and in that moment I realized this day was about to shift in a way none of us expected. I turned fully in my chair when I saw the 2 uniformed officers step into my courtroom. They weren't my regular bailiffs. I knew every face that worked my floor. These men were from outside, and they weren't here by accident. I felt the air change. "Your Honor," one of them said respectfully, holding a folder at his side. I nodded once. "Approach." The young woman looked over her shoulder, confusion written all over her face. "What's going on?" she whispered. I didn't answer her. I waited. The officer stepped forward and handed Mr. Harper a document. Mr. Harper read it quickly, then looked at me. "Your Honor," he said carefully, "this relates to the archived digital evidence we just discussed." I felt my pulse slow, not rise. After 40 years, I've learned something important. When things escalate, you do not. You stay steady. "What specifically?" I asked. Mr. Harper cleared his throat. "The archived content includes potential evidence of assault in 2 additional incidents that were never formally prosecuted," he said. "Those cases have now been reopened." A murmur moved through the courtroom. I watched her face drain of color. "That's ridiculous," she said sharply. "Those were nothing." The officer spoke calmly. "Ma'am, the individuals involved have agreed to provide statements." I saw her knees weaken slightly. She grabbed the edge of the table. For the first time all morning, she wasn't defiant. She was afraid. I leaned forward. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "you were given opportunities before. Complaints were withdrawn. Lessons were offered." She shook her head quickly. "They said it was fine," she insisted. "Did you ever apologize?" I asked. She didn't respond. The silence answered for her. Let me pause here for a moment. Have you ever noticed how people mistake silence for forgiveness? Just because someone walks away doesn't mean the damage disappears. Sometimes it just waits. I looked back at the officers. "What is being requested?" I asked. The senior officer spoke. "Your Honor, based on the reopened complaints and the current incident, we are requesting that the defendant be held pending review." The word "held" echoed in the room. Her eyes widened. "Held?" she said. "Like jail?" I didn't rush my answer. I looked at the file again. I looked at the veteran. I looked at her. I thought about the video, the laughter, the word powerful. I thought about my father telling me that respect is something you earn. Then I made my decision. "Yes," I said calmly. "She will be held pending formal review of the reopened cases." The room felt frozen. She stared at me as if she couldn't process it. "You can't do this," she said, her voice breaking. It was a slap. "It was a pattern," I replied quietly. The officer stepped closer. Her breathing became uneven. "Please," she said suddenly, turning toward the veteran. I said I was sorry. He looked at her with steady eyes. "I accept your apology," he said softly. "But consequences don't disappear with words." That sentence landed harder than anything else said that day. I felt something heavy settle in my chest. Justice is not revenge, but justice also cannot blink. The officers gently guided her wrists forward. I heard it, the sound of the handcuffs clicking shut. It's a sound I've heard thousands of times, but it never becomes casual. I watched her shoulders collapse inward. Tears streamed down her face now. Not dramatic tears, not performative ones. Real ones. Her designer handbag slipped from her arm and fell to the floor with a dull thud. No one moved to pick it up. Everything happened slowly in that moment. I watched her as if in quiet reflection. 2 hours earlier, she had laughed at a man twice her age. Now she could barely stand. I felt no satisfaction, only gravity. I removed my glasses once more and rubbed my eyes gently. "In 40 years," I said quietly to the room, "I have never seen power last longer than accountability." The courtroom remained silent. She turned one last time before being led away. "Your Honor," she whispered through tears, I didn't think anyone would care. I looked directly at her. That, I said, is exactly why we do. The officers guided her out. The door closed behind them, and the room felt different, quieter, heavier. I looked at the veteran. He stood there, hands folded again, just as he had that morning. I didn't want this, he said softly. I know, I replied. He nodded once. I just wanted respect. I leaned forward. And you deserved it, I said. He gave a small nod and stepped back. I dismissed him with gratitude again for his service. As the courtroom began to empty, I remained seated for a moment longer. I've learned something about days like this. They don't end when the gavel falls. They follow you home. Let me ask you something honestly. If you had been in my position, would you have done the same? Would you have drawn the line there? I truly want to know what you think, because moments like this define more than a single case. They define standards. I finally stood and walked back to my chambers. The hallway felt unusually quiet. Christina followed me inside and closed the door gently. That escalated quickly, she said softly. I nodded. It didn't escalate, I replied. It revealed. She understood what I meant. I sat down at my desk and stared at the file again, a slap, a video, a pattern, consequences. It wasn't dramatic in the way people think of drama. It was simple. Choices accumulate, and eventually they answer back. I leaned back in my chair and thought about something else. My grandson. He lives in a world where cameras are constant, where attention feels like currency. I wondered what lessons he would absorb, and I realized something. Today wasn't just about one young woman. It was about drawing a clear line. Respect is not optional, not in a parking lot, not online, not anywhere. But I didn't yet know that this story still had one more chapter waiting for me, because 2 months later, something unexpected arrived on my desk. 2 months later, I was sitting at my desk in chambers when Christina walked in holding a thin white envelope. Your Honor, she said quietly, this was forwarded from the correctional facility. I looked at the return address, her name. For a moment, I just stared at it. I've received letters from defendants before, some angry, some grateful, some blaming everyone but themselves. I wasn't sure which kind this would be. I almost set it aside, but something in me said no, open it. I slid my finger carefully under the seal and unfolded the paper inside. The handwriting wasn't neat. It wasn't polished. It looked like someone who had erased a few times before, committing to each sentence. Your Honor, it began, I don't know if you'll read this, but I need to say something I should have said before. I leaned back in my chair and kept reading. I thought I was powerful. I thought views meant value. When I slapped that man, I didn't see him. I saw content. When you played the video in court, I saw myself for the first time. I paused there. I remembered that moment clearly. The silence, the screen going dark, her face changing. I continued reading. In here, nobody cares about followers. Nobody cares about filters. I've had time to think, real time, and I'm ashamed. That word again, ashamed. I read the rest slowly. I've started the counseling you ordered. I've been reading about veterans. I didn't know what they carried. I didn't know what he carried. I can't undo what I did, but I'm asking for a chance to do better. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on my desk. I sat there for a long moment. After 40 years, I've learned something important. Consequences can break someone, or they can wake someone. The difference is choice. Later that afternoon, Mr. Harper stopped by my chambers. He updated me briefly. The additional complaints were being resolved through structured agreements. She would serve time, but not extensive time. The focus would be rehabilitation, not destruction. I nodded. That's the goal, I said. That evening at dinner, my wife looked at me and said, You're thinking. She always knows. I received a letter, I told her. And? She asked. I think she's finally listening. I said. My wife smiled softly. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that stick, she replied. 3 weeks later, something else happened. The veteran returned to my courtroom, not as a defendant, not as a complainant. He asked to see me briefly after session. I invited him into chambers. He removed his cap respectfully and sat across from me. I met with her, he said. I felt my eyebrows lift slightly. At the Veterans Center, I asked. He nodded. She's been showing up, he said. Quiet, no cameras, no phone. I let that sink in. She apologized, he continued. Not the quick kind, the real kind. I watched his expression carefully. And, I asked gently. He smiled faintly. I told her something, he said. What was that? I asked. He looked at me. I told her that service isn't about uniforms. It's about humility. That sentence stayed with me. I nodded slowly. And how do you feel? I asked him. I feel heard, he said. That's all I wanted. After he left, I sat alone for a few minutes. Justice is not loud. It doesn't trend. It doesn't go viral. It works quietly in small rooms with hard conversations. 2 months after that, I received another update. She had completed her initial counseling phase. She had volunteered extra hours at the Veterans Center beyond what was required. No posts, no announcements, no audience, just work. I thought about the first day she stood in front of me, confident, detached, powerful, and I thought about the word she used later, small. Growth often begins with that realization. Let me ask you something. Do you believe people can truly change, or do you think character is fixed? I've seen both outcomes on this bench, but I can tell you this. When someone faces themselves honestly, something shifts. One afternoon, nearly 6 months after that courtroom day, I received one more letter, shorter this time. Your Honor, I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I understand now. The man I slapped invited me to a veterans breakfast. I listened more than I spoke. I'm learning that respect isn't something you perform, it's something you practice. I set the letter down gently. My father's voice echoed in my memory. Respect is the only thing you truly own. I thought about my grandson again, the world he's growing up in, the noise, the speed, and I felt something steady inside me. The law cannot control culture, but it can draw lines, clear ones. I think about that day often, the sound of the slap on the screen, the laughter echoing in my courtroom, the click of handcuffs, the silence afterward, and I think about the quiet apology in a veterans center. In 40 years, I've learned this. Money fades, fame fades, attention fades, but character remains. That's what we're really judging. So let me ask you this. Do you think I was too harsh on her or not harsh enough? I'm genuinely curious what you think. And here's another question for you. If you were in my position, what would you have done? Would you have shown mercy or delivered justice? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I actually read them, every single one. If this story meant something to you, if you believe in equal justice like I do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Turn on that bell icon so you never miss another story from my courtroom. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, someone who believes that character matters more than cash. And check out the next video on your screen. I've got another incredible story from my courtroom that you won't believe. I'll see you tomorrow with another lesson about justice, respect, and what really matters in this life. I'm Frank Caprio. I've been on this bench for 40 years because I believe something simple. We're all equal before the law, every single one of us, rich or poor, powerful or powerless. That's what makes this country work. Thank you for listening to my story. God bless you, and remember, respect costs nothing, but it's worth everything.